Hello, rompereglas, and welcome to episode 4, Uncolonizing Relationships Through Energetic Sovereignty. I'm so excited to get into this topic with you. In fact, this podcast episode is the true reason why I do what I do. But first, I want to let you know that the doors to my 9-month mastermind are open. I'm calling it the Sovereign, a Metabody Intimacy and Integrity Accelerator. And I know that because you're listening to this, you know that the depth and quality of intimacy in your relationships is directly related to your capacity to hold complexity and nuance in your nervous system, as well as the quality of attunement you have with yourself, right? What you are able to hold for yourself, you are able to hold for the person you're relating with, whether it's in your love life or your business life or your family life. And through both structured practices and somatic process, the Metabody is designed to do both. It's building a foundation of safety and trust in your body from which everything in your life can flourish, not just your personal and professional relationships, because it really is the core work. So it'll help you see clearly so that you can get out of your own way, because oftentimes we're not aware of the ways we sabotage unintentionally through, fear responses that we're not even aware of. So this is really about the energetics. So I want you to imagine being able to hold exquisite, attuned compassion for your emotional process and your human complexity, to consciously choose your truth, love, spiritual values without sacrificing your needs and desires. I want you to imagine that you can experience previously unimaginable spaciousness for pleasure and play in all of its forms, and being able to be more open to vulnerability with the discernment and boundaries that are necessary. And what I love about the Metabody is that you're going to come away from this having deeply honed your subtle energy awareness, and you're able to deepen your intuition as well. But the point of all of it is to come home to safety in your own body when fears and insecurities arise, because they always do in relationships, and especially if you're in relationships with multiple romantic partners. But are even if you aren't, our relational lives are already complex enough. So you get as part of the Metabody, you get a curriculum. It's a bi-weekly video modules delivered to your inbox, which is, holds the frameworks and the foundational principles of the experiential work. So, and this is really the soul level transformation that a lot of us look for, but we get it in pieces, or we get it throughout our lives. And the Metabody is designed to really shorten the amount of time, and it really is the deep dive, moving through, what would take you normally 5 years to get through. It does it within a 9-month period. So it's 6 months of collective process, 3 Zoom calls a month, 3 months of personal integration, which is 3 90-minute intensive one-on-ones. And then there's the online ongoing support over the 9-month over a Facebook group. So get on a 30-minute curiosity call, free curiosity call, just to kind of discuss what it might be like for you, if this is right for you. And you can also, if you haven't worked with me before, you can also get a taste of somatic intimacy alchemy by booking a 60-minute one-on-one call. I'm calling these sessions Attune, and they're discounted $100 through the end of March. So it's $222 through the end of March. And all the links are available in the show notes. And I really look forward to connecting with you. So today, speaking of connection, today I want to connect how energetic sovereignty relates to uncolonizing your relationships. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that when I say relationships, I don't just mean romantic partnerships. I'm talking about your relationships with your children, with your coworkers, with your clients, and more importantly, or most importantly, with yourself. That's always the seed from which we begin, any relationship. So when thinking about seeds, we're going to start from the ground, starting from a few assumptions. The first being that you are already multi-amorous. So if you take anything away from today's transmission, it's the understanding that you are in relationship with everything. You have a relationship with everything. Everything is relational. So you have a relationship to God or to the universe. You have a relationship to your business. Yes, that is definitely a relationship. You have a relationship to money or the spirit of money. You have a relationship to land and place. And this may also translate as a relationship with a particular country or region, whether it's ancestral or current. You have a relationship with your body. And I just want to note that, the relationship may not be a good one. The relationship might feel like shit. It might be a relationship of neglect and abandonment, but it's a relationship nonetheless, right? We're naming it as a relationship, and then we're getting into the quality of relationship. And of course, you have a relationship to your thoughts, to your energy, even specific emotions. Think about the relationship that you have with rage, for example. That's a relationship that usually involves fear and distrust, because that's the relationship you learned to have with that particular emotional energy through your conditioning and socialization. You have a relationship with all parts of yourself. Perhaps you have a relationship of judgment towards your neediness, or you have a really welcoming and loving relationship to the part of you that you designate as kind. And then, of course, you have relationships to the people in your life, the people near and dear to you, people you don't know, groups of people, etc. So that's the first step in uncolonizing relationship, is recognizing that you are in relationship to everything at every moment, and that we're really talking about, okay, what's the quality of relationship then? And I also want to stop for a moment and just make a distinction between uncolonizing and decolonizing. I use the word uncolonizing because for me, decolonizing is very specifically attached to the indigenous experience. So, decolonizing is really about land and place. It is about culture. So I really want to leave that and have that be sort of a sacred process in and of itself. And that uncolonizing is really about stripping away in the body, like from a body sense, but also like mentally in all sorts of levels, stripping away what is not you, what is not inherently you. And that's a lifelong process. But, here we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it as it pertains to relationships. And I also want to offer the truth around, this idea that we're in relationship with everything. That is indigenous wisdom right there. So, I just want to name where it's coming from, and where we are in history is that we're returning to that indigenous wisdom, lots of different types of indigenous wisdom or indigenous ways, ancient ways. So the other foundational tenet I embrace is the distribution of weight of importance throughout all of your relationships, right? Usually we put them on a hierarchy. We put your relationships with your children, family of origin, romantic partnerships, you put it at the top of the pyramid or the hierarchy. And oftentimes relationship to land or place is at the bottom. So I want you to think about distributing that weight more evenly to collapse that pyramid. And as I mentioned in the Love Anarchy episode, which was episode 2 of this season, the way that we're socialized, both, just from our biology and our culture, just the way that we're raised, we're taught that our belongingness, our worthiness, and our attachment needs are met externally, right? And that all feeds into the hierarchy. So that's just sort of a natural how things are set up biologically speaking, but they're also socialized through culture. So uncolonizing relationships flattens that hierarchy and acknowledge that there is deep intimacy healing that can happen in any any one of those relationships that I mentioned earlier, like relationship to land, that can be deeply healing, obviously, relationship to spirit. And I just want to offer like a little example of intimacy healing that can happen through spirit. I remember being in my training, and we had a class on spirituality, and the way we started the class was to have our grievances with God. And oftentimes we don't really allow ourselves to have grievance with God, because we're like, oh, we can't be mad at God. But we really allowed ourselves to be mad at God, and I was really pissed, and I was like, where the fuck were you? Where the fuck were you when I needed you? And so we had it out. And so that was a process that I engaged in order to improve my relationship with spirit. So that's an intimacy healing process right there. So let's get into energetic sovereignty now that the foundation is set. So for me, energetic sovereignty is having an unwavering connection to source within yourself. And that doesn't mean bypassing. That means understanding your humanity as part of your divinity. And that includes embracing your shadow, allowing yourself to experience all of your emotions, honoring your boundaries, right? The yeses, your passion, your desire, and also your limitations, owning your sexual and creative expression, and moving in alignment with your integrity, which for me is about heart integrity, like moving in alignment with your truth as love. So this involves a deep, intimate connection to self. Like you have to be so attuned to what's going on inside of you to be able to be energetically sovereign. So from an attachment perspective, I think of this as having a secure attachment to self. And it's not that you're not attached to anything else, but it's that there's an awareness, or there's an understanding that your relationship with yourself is first, right? So I want to say something about colonization. I'm going to take a sip of my tea. If you're drinking tea with me as you listen, take a sip with me. So I want to say something about colonization. And this is just from my experiences as having grown up in Puerto Rico, deeply, deeply colonized, and really understanding colonization from like a deeply intuitive, embodied place. So colonization for me, when I think about the body, the soma, the psyche, is about the denial of self, the denial of your own authenticity via external power and control. So I think about the imposition of colonial rule over a people, right? I think of our conditioning and socialization as a rules that get imposed on the body, which is why I thought of romper reglas, right? Because we're by uncolonizing, by moving towards sovereignty, we are breaking our attachment to these rules that have been conditioned into our bodies. So when I think about colonization being about denial of self or self-betrayal, right? When we go against the self, sovereignty for me is about radical acceptance of the self through compassionate permission giving, saying yes to everything. And of course, we're afraid to say yes to everything because we've been taught to be afraid of certain aspects of the self. We're taught to be afraid of our rage or of our shadowy aspects. But when we say yes to them, they melt, they dissolve, they reveal their wisdom to us. So just to get into it, a little bit of a definition. Sovereignty means self-governing, being of supreme power or authority. It is about, for me, in terms of the human sense, uncolonized, uncivilized, wild, primal, right? Because the colonized self is a domesticated self. It's a self that's dimmed, where the light has been turned down. So sovereignty is about lighting it the fuck up. Okay. And this sovereignty happens on multiple levels. It happens on an energetic level, reclamation of energies that have been socked away, tucked away, hidden. It happens on a physical level. I think of this as the nervous system, but also the food that you put into your body, right? How you treat your body. It happens on a mental level. Are your thoughts yours? Are your thoughts truly yours, or are they colonized thoughts? It happens on an emotional level, right? What are the stories that you're telling yourself, and how are they feeding your emotions? That's where sort of the mental and the emotional combine. And sovereignty happens on a spiritual level, right? Do you feel the divinity within you, and do you live your life from that place, from that understanding? Or do you think of God and spirit as being external? So again, this is highly relational, and it's about energetically bringing forward all aspects of your expression, even the parts that you have learned to have a negative or aversive relationship with. And the idea of sovereignty, this the I want to say the understanding of sovereignty is that no part of you is wrong. Everything is welcome. And so that offers you the opportunity, or the invitation rather, to be curious about what's here. So how do we cultivate this healthy attachment to yourself? What is it involved? What is involved in it? So sovereignty is a process that involves unhooking from that internalized conditioning, whether it's through personal trauma or the internalization of collective conditioning or brainwashing, which can be experienced through, right? We experience this brainwashing through like harsh self-judgment or criticism. We experience feelings of unworthiness. We experience shame. We experience doubt of ourselves. We experience disconnection from sensation in our body, especially if you are exquisitely sensitive as I am. If you're not in tune with sensation, it's because you've had to maybe disconnect from sensation in order to survive. Maybe that's something that wasn't valued in your family. Maybe it's something that people didn't talk about. We also experience it through our binary thinking, right? This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white, this is all, or this is nothing. And we also experience it through the belief that something or someone outside of us holds the answer. And that can be even like, oh, if I had this amount of money, then I would feel okay. Or this coach has the answers, right? No, the answers are within you. And you want to be coached by someone who's going to help you go inward and find those answers, and give you and offer you the pathway, like offer you some guidance around going within yourself. So anyway, these experiences that I just shared, like the self-criticism, the judgment, all of those experiences are the echoes of personal and collective trauma that rob you of your inherent sovereignty. And when I say inherent sovereignty, I mean that you were born, energetically speaking, you were born with a full spectrum of your erotic life force. And over the course of being human in an imperfect world, you learn to bring parts of yourself forward, the parts that were accepted, prized, rewarded, wanted, praised, and then you leave the other parts of yourself back. Right? You leave parts of yourself back that, from my experience, I left parts of myself back that were more like shiny and maybe loudmouth or dramatic. Those were the parts that I wasn't really able to bring forward when I was little. And even experiences like fear, like I wasn't really allowed to feel my fear because I had to be courageous. I had to sort of push through my fear. And part of my work now is really feeling it. So, as I've mentioned before, these experiences, this bringing parts forward and leaving parts behind, right? This experience of maybe not attrition, but almost like a atrophy or cutting off, those are baked into our early attachment system. And we absorb the reality of our environment through the relationships we have with our caregivers into our energetic bodies, as though we were inhaling like scent molecules, right? And that's because there's no ego barrier separating us, the tea bag, from the water, which is the environment, right? It's all sort of like there's no filters. There's really no filter. And I talk about this in the previous episode, in episode 3 of season 2. I talk about how intimacy wounds form and how they affect the energy body in more detail. So you can go back and listen to that. So uncolonizing mind, body, spirit is about reclaiming that inherent sovereignty, reclaiming your energy, and reclaiming your creative and erotic life force. And again, that's a lifelong process. And there are tools. There are real tools that I use every day and that I teach. So because we learn to attach outward and lose ourselves in the process of getting our belongingness needs met externally, etc., my understanding of sovereignty is about attaching to the self in an intimate way. What it looks like is treating your relationship to self as a primary relationship. Healing involves opening up contractions in the body, the places where love has not reached its light into, or where love is constricted, or where love is held back via traumatic hurts. Sovereignty involves reclamation via retrieval of disowned energy and devotion to energetic, physical/nervous system, mental, emotional, and spiritual systems. And absolutely, sovereignty, energetic sovereignty, cannot happen without boundaries, right? Tuning in to those intuitive yeses and nos through even physically recognizing your limitations on any given day or in any given moment. That is all sort of the internal compass that inform your boundaries. So I just want to reiterate. In the process of socialization and trauma, we abandon aspects of our humanity. We relinquish parts of our authenticity. We cast aside essential child parts vital to love, creativity, and sexuality. And to abandon, in this definition, is to turn away from your own love. And this is what happens when we get hurt. We turn away from ourselves. And then sovereignty requires or involves a turning towards, like owning, embracing, loving, approving, and even reparenting, if you want to use sort of more psychological language. Attaching to self means living in aligned, compassionate relationship to the spirit self and the earth self, which is your messy humanity. And that involves definitely ego and shadow. So I'm going to take a drink. And we're going to get into how energetic sovereignty supports conscious relating. So this is where we get into healing relationships, or relationships that support an environment of healing, that energetic reclamation of inherent sovereignty. So, just want to say that this is not something that process of coming into sovereignty is not something that you do alone. You can absolutely do it in relationships. And I highly recommend doing it in relationships, but you have to be in relationships that support those conditions of reclamation. So sovereignty is my internal vibratory version of social justice, because it involves inner liberation or inner freedom from oppression, right? Are you oppressing yourself in your thoughts? Are you oppressing yourself in the ways that you don't allow yourself to be in your body fully or express yourself fully, right? This is how we do to ourselves what was done to us, and we do to other people what was done to us, right? Sometimes we reject other people when we have been rejected, and we reject ourselves, or we reject certain aspects of ourselves. And I believe that the less we oppress ourselves internally, the less we want to oppress other people, right? The more, we're just like, yeah, let you do what you want to do. Like, we just allow, when you offer allowance to yourself, you allow other people to be who they are. When you accept yourself, you are more likely to accept other people. The ultimate result of energetic sovereignty is about having the capacity to hold the full size of your personal power and direct it towards meaningful and purposeful work, which is when I think about the direction piece, it's about authorship or authority over that energy, right? We can direct it in a way that feels aligned and good, aligned to our passions and to what we care about. So again, this is a process. This is not like, oh, I'm done, I'm sovereign. It is an ongoing process. I know that for myself, I'm always reclaiming new parts of my energy. I'm always uncovering different aspects. And that's why it's so fucking exciting. That's why I'm like in this, because it's like, oh, what else wants to emerge, right? And just want to go back to say, when we don't feel powerful, and this is important, when we don't feel powerful, and this happens in subtle ways, we seek to gain power externally. There's the obvious manipulation of power that we see in leadership, right? In governmental leadership, let's say. And there are also subtle manipulations of power that we see in leadership. We see this sometimes in the coaching industry with the ways, products or programs are marketed. There's also the subtle control patterns in relationships, and these are really, really subtle. And this is what the Metabody really gets into, is the one where like harder to detect, and they're absolutely acting out in our partnerships. So the subtle control patterns is where my zone is. That's where I like to hang out. And these subtle control patterns arise only because our intimacy wounds are getting activated in our social nervous system, right? And when these engage the ego, and then it leads to protective behaviors. And it's important to say that because I want you to have compassion for when those parts arise. Like when we are acting out in a control pattern, it's not because we're dicks. It's because we're afraid. And once you can name that you're afraid, then you can also get curious. You say, oh yeah, I'm feeling fear around such and such. And the thing is that we're often unaware of the very subtle ways fear shows up in our systems. I remember when I was working with my intimacy teacher, when I was doing intimacy healing with her. She's an energetic witch, really, really talented. And we were in a session and she was like, where do you feel your fear? And I was looking at her like, I'm not afraid. I don't feel fear right now. And she's like, where do you feel your fear? She knew, she could sense it. She could sense that I was afraid. And when I really sort of tuned in, I was like, oh yeah, there it is. It was in my belly. I could feel it, So we're often oblivious to fear unless it's turned up so high that we're anxious, right? Where it's so obvious we can't ignore it. And I think that's part of the reason why we see so much anxiety, is because we've been ignoring the fear for so fucking long. And it's ramped up to the point where we can't ignore it anymore. And it's like, oh, then we feel paralyzed by it. So again, we know the obvious examples of fear-based behaviors or control patterns that are acted out in leadership and things like that. But there's lots of other little ways of how shadow and intimacy wounds show up in your relationships. Thinking about, for example, like, when I think about raising children, for example, there were plenty of times where I just wanted to come in and just like squash expression because it was inconvenient to me, right? As a colonial ruler of the home, it was inconvenient to me. I wanted something, I was going to control it. I had power and I was going to use it. Right. So those are the ways it shows up perhaps in the way we raise our children, or like, you have to do something, or no, we're doing this right now. And yeah, sometimes it does involve like, hey, look, we need to get out of the house right now, or we need to do something. We need to work as a team. And there's ways to communicate that. And there's ways to communicate situations like that where you can clean up the energetics with your kids and let them know, yeah, there's some times where you don't get to do everything you want, and sometimes we take turns, right? So really, again, flattening some of the hierarchies, but still having giving your children a sense of authority and authorship while you also have yours. That's a whole negotiation process I won't get into right now, but so that's a way that you know subtle control patterns can come into parenting, for example. And it can also come into, I think often about, the people that I work with, and I feel this a lot in myself as well. We often have sort of this rescuer dynamic. And often in a rescuing dynamic, we're often unaware of this, but we're looking to feel useful. We're looking to feel needed. We're looking to not be abandoned. And when we're looking to rescue someone, we're looking for people who need help. We're looking for a victim. And when we're in a helping place, we feel safe. We feel safe because we're needed, because we feel valued. Our ego is getting all the accolades, right, from ourselves, perhaps, or from the person that we're helping. But the shadow is that, we are at a covert level seeking to be needed and wanted, to have value, to have worth, to not be left. Yeah, and we can't get those needs met. We can't get the deep needs met of being valued by somebody who is so in their victimhood or so needs help. They can't offer us that in return. So we give, and there's subtle ways that we seek to get. I can, I remember being in one of my classes. We were sort of meeting each other for the first time in my somatic training, and we were just kind of pairing up with people. And I remember standing there with a person, and the facilitator was asking, "So what's your agenda?" And I was like looking into this person's eyes, and I could feel the part of me that just really wanted to connect. Like, ooh, like, you're a new person. I want to get to know you. I could feel my fear, and I could feel from that fear, oh, I want you to like me. I want to be funny. I want to, like, make you laugh because I want you to like me. Right. So these are the subtle ways that we like do shit because we want something in return, because we want to be seen, we want to be met. And this being seen and being met and being valued, like, those are beautiful things when they happen in relationship. And we also have to see ourselves clearly. We have to meet ourselves. And this doesn't need to happen first with you and then in relationship, but to be aware of that, you can give those things to yourself. So yeah, so we often have agendas that we're not aware of. And again, why this happens is because there's that intimacy wound activation. There's the egoic collusion, right? The thinking brain starts to be like, okay, this is how we can do it. And, because there's a overcoupling process there. And then the relational strategies come in to, like, oh yeah, this worked before. This is how I'm going to do it now. I know that for me, like, an intimacy wound that's pretty deep for me is like, I have this spidey sense for when somebody's attention shifts away from me. When a partner, I can feel them like turning away from me, and boom, I'm activated. My fear is activated, and I can sense it because I'm so attuned to it, right? Because we get sensitized around these hurts. And we keep repeating these patterns because they are so well grooved into our unconsciousness. And oftentimes, like, my experience working with people is that we don't quite know what they are. We see the pattern, we see sort of the behavior playing out, but we don't really understand from an embodied sense, from an energetic sense, how fear is playing into it. And we don't know how to transform them as a result. So one of the tools that I use in the process of cultivating energetic sovereignty is that compassionate inquiry process, which I call embodied relational presencing. And that helps you go inward into the activations. It helps you, even with the egoic collusions when they arise, it helps you bring sort of this curiosity to them, this opening to them, this relationship with them, so that they can inform you and talk to you and and so that you can, you know, behave or act from a place that is aligned with your values. So, sovereignty supports conscious correlating and healing relationships by helping you cultivate safety within the root of your own energy body so that you don't have to acquire it externally. It helps you by separating what is intention, like honoring the connection, versus what is ego, for example, being right. So, it checks for possible hidden agendas. It helps you be responsible for your activations and triggers, owning your hurt places and removing blame and shame from them. It helps you resource yourself from within. And if you don't have the resources to, if you don't have that, if it doesn't feel like enough, you can resource yourself in community and with other people. It doesn't always have to be with a partner. And it helps you move, energize, and integrate any emotions that need to be processed. And my favorite part is that it helps you bring activations, it helps you bring hurts, it helps you bring truth to your partner or partners with self-responsibility and integrity of heart. All in all, it cleans up the stray energetics in relationships that can often build up as resentment and toxic residue. And we all know what it feels like when there's resentfulness in relationship, like those really build up and it becomes so heavy that you don't even know where those resentments came from or how to resolve them. So that's where I want to end today. I want to end really briefly with 6 features of uncolonizing relationships. And I got this from Gwendolyn Benowin, who's an Indigenous trans person. I just thought it was so lovely the way that she put this together. And it's just like encompasses all of what I shared today. So this is the 6 features of uncolonizing relationships. The first is learn to recognize love. Love does not fix you. It does not heal your past. And this is really talking about, in particular, romantic partnerships. They don't resolve your insecurities or lead you to violate your boundaries. It is not obsessive, fearful, or controlling. This is trauma. Instead, love affirms you, it makes room, and it's easy to lean into. Love exists in all relationships. Number 2, learn to practice self-care and what I call self-devotion. Self-compassion, self-affirmation, and self-nourishment. Learning to really see yourself clearly, to offer yourself grace and forgiveness. Number 3, you are your own soulmate. You and your partner are not the same. This is not about enmeshment. It's not about transaction or ownership. The truth is that no one is going to save you. Your needs are yours. You can express them and get support from others for you to meet yourself. You can resource externally, but it's really up to you to meet your own needs and advocate for them. Instead, people in relationships stand on their own 2 feet and they choose each other every day. And yourself, you choose yourself every day and the other partner as well. Number 4, practice intimacy and presence. Learn to be with yourself intimately so that you can practice intimacy with others. This includes the parts of you that are harder to love, the fearful parts, the shamed parts. Your job is to nurture the child within. Number 5 is learning to stand in accountability. Focus on your growth and healing. Recognize what's yours and what's other people's. Hello, boundaries. Apologize when you act out of fear and defense and forgive yourself. Allow it to be messy. Allow it to be imperfect. Embrace learning instead of trying to get it right according to some white supremacist standard. And finally, number 6, embrace a multiple relationship model. Consider your relationship with earth, spirit, family, self, friendships, lovers as all equally meaningful and valuable places that support your healing. This was so nourishing to share with you. And I hope that you received this transmission and that it was pinging in your body. Again, I welcome you to share your reactions. Send me an email, DM me. I love to hear from you. And I will see you on the next episode. Mwah. Bye, rompereglas.